You're listening to the Catholic Wives Desiring Peace podcast. Today's episode is the second in our husband series titled God, Spouse, Children, Others, Understanding the Catholic Family Order. Are you a Catholic wife grappling with challenging in-laws? The Catholic Wives Desiring Peace podcast is your sanctuary for navigating these sometimes stormy seas of life with toxic in-laws, while being validated for what you've experienced. Join me, your host, Miriam Susan, a Catholic wife who's weathered nearly 3 decades of in-law drama, as we tackle the tough issues you're dealing with head on. Hi, Miriam Susan here. Welcome to this second episode of the Husband series that I have created for my listeners. If this is the first time listening, I would highly encourage you to go back to the episode just prior to this one, and possibly even going back to my very first episode on the Catholic Wives Desiring Peace podcast to get a feel for my background and a feel for why I'm doing this series. I don't want to eat up too much of this episode because I think it's going to be a little bit on the long side. So I want to jump right into today's topic, which is God, spouse, children, others, understanding the Catholic family order. Now, I was not really familiar with this concept of the proper order of a Catholic family until I heard a therapist reference it when speaking to me and my husband. And so I thought, well, this is probably an important topic to cover, especially in the husband series. So if you are a husband listening to this podcast episode, welcome. I am so grateful that you have validated your wife enough to take some time to listen to this episode. Not many husbands will do that and listen to the concerns that their wives have. And so I do want to acknowledge and thank you for making this understanding your wife a priority in your life. And so let's jump right in to the topic for today. And we're going to be talking about the proper order of families. And the very first person, the very first entity in the properly ordered Catholic family is God. And there should be a primacy or a level of importance of God in our family life. So God is the foundation of a Catholic family. Deuteronomy 6:5 and Matthew 22 verses 37 and 38 are very similar. So I'll read Deuteronomy first. Deuteronomy chapter 6 verse 5. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. And then in Matthew it says, he said to him, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment. So how does God, being number one in our lives, really strengthen all other relationships? Well, if we have a right relationship with God, if we're trying to do our best to please God, that will impact every single other relationship we have in our lives. And on the flip side, if we do not have a good relationship with God, if we see God as this tormentor, if we see him as somebody trying to control us, then that will affect how we see all other relationships in our lives. When we put God first, when we put God at the center of our personal lives, there is grace that flows from God to our family. God becomes an instrument of peace working through us into our families. Because really, as Catholics, we know, or we should know, that when things are ordered properly with our relationships with God, everything else can have the best chance for success. And success being, love. It could be any definition of success in a spiritual way. And so that should be something that we desire to do first. And so the very first priority of any of our lives, husband, wife, should be to have a good, solid relationship with God. So how do we bring that God-centered focus into our family? Well, one of the things our family does is we listen to the daily readings every night during dinner. We used to do it where one of us would read, but it just got to be kind of awkward and sometimes because everybody was trying to eat. And so we have found that listening to the podcast, it's in the Laudate app. If you've never heard of that app, or if you don't have that app, you can find the daily readings in the Laudate app. It's usually at the very top of the list when you first open up the app, and then you tap where it says daily readings and saint of the day, and then you can tap on daily readings, and then it'll open up this page that's from the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, and tap listen to podcasts, and you'll be able to listen to the readings of that day. And that's just one way that we try to incorporate our Catholic faith and to incorporate our faith in God into our daily life. Another is family prayer time, whether it is saying a rosary together, whether it is just a time of praying together, maybe at night before bed, maybe in the morning before getting started. Any way you can incorporate prayer is a great way to bring the focus of your family back to God. Of course, as Catholics, attending Mass together, that's a wonderful thing to do. If your family is like ours, where sometimes my husband works on the weekends, and so we have to kind of adjust our Mass schedule, but we do always try to attend Mass together as a family. And then finally, one way that you can do is just to incorporate some Catholic traditions into your day-to-day life. There are so many books out there on how to live liturgically, how to maybe incorporate different saints of the day and to your daily life. Maybe you take some time to celebrate your confirmation saint whenever your saint has their feast day, do something special for that. But there's many, many ways to incorporate your Catholic faith and your love of God into your daily life. So that's number one. So number one, God should be the number one priority in our family life. And now this is all in context of we, speaking for my listeners who are wives, we have tense relationships with our in-laws. And a lot of times those relationships will cause this properly ordered structure of a Catholic family to get out of whack, to get out of alignment, to get derailed by some of the demands that come from our in-laws or our parents. And so that is why I am focusing. I probably should have said this at the beginning of the episode, but that is why I'm focusing on sharing what a properly ordered Catholic family is supposed to look like. Because sometimes, just like with situations with our children, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. The kid that is maybe more needy, maybe has some issues that need to be addressed, they're the ones that get a lot of the attention. And sometimes that's okay for a period of time. But when it comes to our in-laws and a person who is outside of our immediate family, being that squeaky wheel and demanding the attention, that's when things can start to fall into disorder, can fall into chaos. And so that's why I wanted to bring in this concept of the properly ordered Catholic family to my podcast, to you, so that you can have a better understanding of it. So number one is God. Number two is our spouse. Our spouse should be our second priority. Wives, that should be your husband. Husbands, this should be your wife. And this ties into the sacramental nature of marriage. So in the Catechism, number 1660, it says, the marriage covenant by which a man and a woman form with each other an intimate communication of life and love has been founded and endowed with its own special laws by the Creator. By its very nature, it is ordered to the good of the couple, as well as to the generation and education of children. Christ the Lord raised marriage between the baptized to the dignity of a sacrament. So just the fact that the Catholic Church sees marriage as a sacrament demonstrates the level of importance a good, healthy marriage is for us, those of us who are in the marriage, for the Catholic Church, and really for the world as a whole. And then our marriage reflects, or should reflect, Christ's love for the church. And this is taken from the book of Ephesians, chapter 5, verses 25 through 33. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, in order to make her holy by cleansing her with the washing of water by the word, so as to present the church to himself in splendor, without a spot or wrinkle or anything of the kind. Yes, so that she may be holy and without blemish. In the same way, husbands should love their wives as they do their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hates his own body, but he nourishes and tenderly cares for it, just as Christ does for the church, because we are members of his body. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. This is a great mystery, and I am applying it to Christ and the church. Each of you, however, should love his wife as himself, and a wife should respect her husband. Husbands, you are called to love your wife, just like Christ loved the church. Husbands are supposed to sacrificially love their wives, and wives are supposed to respect their husbands and support them. This is a team effort. This is an opportunity for us to work together to get each other to heaven, really, is what I kind of see marriage as. This is an opportunity for me to help my husband get to heaven and for my husband to help me to get to heaven. So why does prioritizing your husband or your wife, your spouse, benefit the entire family? Well, the marital relationship, that is the heart of the family. And even if you don't have children at this point, I think we can all look to our own parents, whether our parents had good marriages, whether they were unmarried, whether they had bad marriages, whatever the situation was with our parents, we can see whether or not that relationship that our parents had with each other was healthy. Did it contribute to the health of the family? Because it is at the heart of the family. That's the way God designed it. And so when we prioritize the taking care of, the respecting, the loving of our spouse, it really does bring health and vibrance to the entire family. Because when a couple is fighting, especially if you can remember back as a child, if your parents were ever fighting, you can remember how that made you feel and how it made you feel unsettled and maybe fearful and anxious. And that's not what God wants for our families. He wants us as a married couple to be unified. And a lot of times when we have issues with our parents, with our in-laws, that unity is not as tight as it should be. Maybe there are some fractures in that unity. And so it's really important for us to take a step back and look at what's going on and think, okay, my number one priority is to serve and love God. My number two priority is to serve and love my spouse. Am I doing this with my actions right now? Now, there are other responsibilities that we have as married couples to other people, to our jobs, to our children, to maybe neighbors, maybe to our parents. And that doesn't mean that they are not important. It does mean that we have to figure out how to balance things. And sometimes, like I was saying, with demanding in-laws, with behavior that, that causes some fractures in our relationship, we have to figure out how to balance those accordingly. And so when possible, I think it's important to find time to spend just with each other, to have a date night or to have just time between mom and dad or husband and wife, whatever it is, if you don't have children, and really try to cultivate that relationship, that love that brought you together in the first place. Now, for many, many years, my husband and I didn't really have a chance to do date nights. And it was partly because we were in the military. We didn't have a support network. I didn't really know somebody that could watch our children. We did have a few times, but there's a lot of, couple therapists or couple counselors who will say, you really have to have a date night every week. And I realize, you know what? That's not realistic for all of us. A lot of them will say you need to get away for a weekend just by yourselves without the children. Well, you know what? The first time my husband and I went away for a weekend was, gosh, we had been married at least 10 years before that happened because, like I said, we just didn't have the support and we just didn't feel comfortable leaving our children alone. And especially with many of us Catholic families who do have lots of children, it's hard to find somebody, even grandparents, who are willing to take on a house full of kids when that's not something that they are accustomed to. I mean, I can only imagine, being in my 60s or 70s and not having had little kids around the house, and then all of a sudden, volunteering to watch my future grandchildren all at once and feeling a bit overwhelmed. And so, as much as there is an importance that we need to put on spending time together, I know that date nights and getting away might not be possible. It might just be something like, okay, we just have a date night in, and maybe the kids get involved in a game that they can play by themselves. Maybe you have them in an enclosed backyard and you let them play, and you and your spouse just have a glass of wine and watch the kids play, but have like deliberately chosen time to spend talking to each other and to reconnect, because the days do get absolutely crazy sometimes. And also, we need to figure out ways that we can support each other in our spiritual growth. Find ways to, carve out time for your husband to join a men's group, for you to get connected with other women in your parish or in your community, just to encourage our own spiritual growth. Now, there are some misconceptions about putting our spouses before our children. And a lot of them have to do with, he's a grown up, she's an adult, she can take care of herself, the children cannot. And in some senses, that very much is true. If you have toddlers, you know that you are on 24/7 while they're awake. And even a lot of times when they're asleep, if they tend to wake up in the middle of the night. And so there is this misconception that we can just leave each other to our own, and that, maybe it's a little bit selfish to focus on just connecting with my husband while we have kids who are needy. There's a balance. There is a balance between finding a way to connect with your spouse, connect with that person that you have vows with to stay committed to and stay married to until death do we part, and the fact that when you have small children, your time is totally divided between caring for, wiping little noses, getting little kids fed, and also trying to keep your marriage alive and healthy. Now, let's move into number 3 in line. So God is number 1, our spouse is number 2, number 3 is children. Children are the third priority in marriage. The gift and responsibility of children in Catholic teaching can be summed up in a few key verses and catechisms of the Catholic Church. So Psalm 127, verse 3, sons are indeed a heritage from the Lord. The fruit of the womb is a reward. And I was telling a friend recently that babies are always a blessing. Babies are always a blessing. And so children are truly a blessing from the Lord. Now, the catechism, there's a lot of good in catechisms 2221 to 2231, but I'm going to focus on 2221 and 2223. So 2221 from the Catechism of the Catholic Church says, the fecundity of conjugal love cannot be reduced solely to the procreation of children, but must extend to their moral education and their spiritual formation. The role of parents in education is of such importance that it is almost impossible to provide an adequate substitute. The right and the duty of parents to educate their children are primordial and inalienable. And then 22:23 says parents have the first responsibility for the education of their children. They bear witness to this responsibility first by creating a home where tenderness, forgiveness, respect, fidelity, and disinterested service are the rule. The home is well suited for education in the virtues. This requires an apprenticeship in self denial, sound judgment, and self mastery, the preconditions of all true freedom. Parents should teach their children to subordinate the material and instinctual dimensions to interior and spiritual ones. So, we as parents have a serious responsibility to take care of our children. Children will benefit from a good relationship with their parents. When we are unified as a couple, for children, it provides security and a model for their future relationships. If you had a tumultuous childhood, if you had parents who disagreed, if you had parents who threw dishes when they got angry, if you had parents who shut the other one out and closed themselves up in a room for days just to punish the other parent, you know how that made you feel. And so being unified as parents does give a sense of security, of calm, of love, of acceptance to children. And that's where it can be a little bit damaging to have an outside influence from your parents, from your in-laws, encroaching on your relationship and causing some fractures in that parental unity. It's also important to avoid a family where the dynamics are focused on the children. Having a child-centric family dynamic is not healthy. There is a level of overindulgence, or it can be helicopter parenting that comes when your whole marriage, your whole life is focused on the children. So there is a balance that needs to be attained where you can balance giving the children attention and allowing for some freedom and some independence. As Catholic parents, we have the top responsibility of nurturing our children's relationship with God. We are the primary educators in the faith for our children. And I'm so thankful to be in parishes that recognize that the responsibility of educating the children is not on the religious education director. It's not on the Catholic schools. It's not on the catechist. It's on us. We are the ones who are living out the faith day to day that our kids can see kind of behind the curtain when nobody else is looking. They see how we handle things, and they see how we relate to God. And that is their primary education in the faith. Now, we've got God number one, spouse number two, children number three. And this is in the level of importance that these relationships should have in our day-to-day life. So what about everybody else? Well, they come in spot number four, and that is for extended family and all others. The place of extended family in the Catholic family order is behind God and behind your spouse, and it is behind your children. Now, you can honor your parents while maintaining proper boundaries. Exodus 20:12 says, "Honor your father and mother so that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you." That doesn't mean that you can't have some proper boundaries with your parents. I have a whole other episode about honoring your father and mother. I highly encourage you to go back and listen to that episode if you have not listened to it previously, and really go into it with an open mind and consider that perhaps the way you have always understood and the way that you have been taught honor your father and mother may not be scripturally sound. It may not be exactly the way that God would have you to interpret it. So, honoring your father and mother, there is a role for grandparents in family life. It is important to, when it is a properly ordered, when it is a healthy relationship, to have grandparents in your family life. But it is important to maintain healthy relationships with others while preserving your family's priorities. So that means you have to balance family time with social engagements and community involvement. That means if you have needs within your family that are really important, they need to come before some outside commitments, whether it's an expectation to be at a certain family gathering that your parents are hosting and they want you to be there, or it's something with an employer, or it's something with your neighborhood, or something with anybody else. Because again, a properly ordered Catholic family focuses on God first, spouse second, children third, and all others after. Now, our families do have a role as Catholics in the evangelization and service of others. So, as a Catholic family, we can be a witness to society through our faith. And the Catechism 2214 says the divine fatherhood is the source of human fatherhood. This is the foundation of the honor owed to parents. The respect of children, whether minors or adults, for their father and mother is nourished by the natural affection born of the bond uniting them. It is required by God's commandment. Now, there are some different levels of respect, and Father Mike Schmitz did a very, very good video on the different kinds of respect that people are owed. And we need to keep that in mind, that some of the respect that our parents are owed is just because they're fellow human beings, right? We should have a level of respect for every human because we are all created in God's image. So there is a level of respect just for someone else who is created in God's image. There's another level of respect that has to do with a person's authority, whether it is a priest, whether it is a police officer, whether it is a teacher, whether it is a parent. There's a level of respect that God expects of us for other people just because of the role that they have in our lives. That's what is owed to our parents. Now, there's another level of respect that comes from earning it. And some of us have parents who have not earned that level of respect. So while they might not have that third level of respect, they do have, or they should have, those other two levels of respect from us. So there is a way that we can respect our parents, our fathers and our mothers, or our in-laws, but not be able to include that natural affection born of the bond uniting them that the Catechism speaks of. Now, there's also the Catholic Catechism 2218 that says the fourth commandment reminds grown children of their responsibility toward their parents. As much as they can, as much as they can, they must give them material and moral support in old age and in times of illness, loneliness, or distress. Jesus recalls this duty of gratitude. A lot of our toxic parents, a lot of parents who like to be kind of spiritually abusive, they will point this one out and kind of gloss over the fact that it says as much as they can. And sometimes when the relationship is really damaged, when the relationship is really controlling or toxic, the part as much as they can may be just praying for them and doing lots of things, but from afar. It might be just sending a check and not having any interaction because it's more than you can give. And you can still have a level of gratitude toward your parents and have boundaries that hold some distance. So let's talk about some challenges in maintaining this proper order. So we have, remember, God first, spouse second, children third, everyone else a distant fourth. So, some of the common obstacles may include work pressures and time management. We might have a very demanding job, or our husbands might have a very demanding job. And so, it requires some skills in time management. Otherwise, it can cause an imbalance in that proper order. Sometimes there are expectations from our culture, from our society, that contradict Catholic teachings. So we have to become aware. First of all, we have to know what the Catholic teachings are. And then we have to become aware that our society and our culture doesn't really care about honoring our Catholic faith. That's on us to know and understand and figure out ways that we can deal with those. And then probably why most of us are listening to this podcast is dealing with family members who don't understand or respect this order. Now, that doesn't mean that just because somebody doesn't understand it doesn't mean that they don't have to follow it. No. If they don't understand it, it's on you to ensure that you make sure that your order is maintained. You're maintaining a properly ordered Catholic family. It does not fall on the shoulders of anybody else. It falls on your shoulders, even if the other people involved don't understand. So, what are some strategies for overcoming these challenges of having these outside influences that are trying to kind of disrupt the proper order of our family? Well, number one, we need to have some clear communication with each other, with our spouses, about our priorities. We also need to find ways to set boundaries with our extended family and with work. As a wife, if my husband is constantly going and spending time with his family and leaving me to tend to the children and tend to the house and tend to our pets and tend to our property, that's not right. That's a breakdown in the order of a family. And the same thing goes for us wives. If we're constantly running to our family's house, running to a sister's house, running to whoever, a cousin, and spending time with them, that leaves us lacking in what our responsibilities are towards our family at home. Another thing that you might find really helpful for your family is to create a family mission statement. And that's really great if you have children who are a little bit older who can contribute, and you can all come together and decide, and this is our mission statement. This is the focus of our family. This is what we're going to come back to when things get a little bit crazy. This is our North Star that we focus on, and this is the purpose of our family. And when things get out of whack, any of us can say, okay, does this fit with our family mission statement? And this is a statement that everybody has agreed upon, so that when it starts to get off balance, anybody really should have the right to say, you know what, I think we're getting it a little wrong here. Let's refocus and come back to this statement. Now, of course, there is the important role of prayer and constantly receiving the sacrament, especially of the Eucharist, to maintain the proper order. We should regularly go and seek to receive the Eucharist and regularly receive the sacrament of confession. Another option for you may be to seek out spiritual direction when needed. For us personally, it's been a little bit hard to find a good spiritual director, but that can be someone that can help you adjust and get back to maintaining that proper order of your family. So, what are the benefits of having a properly ordered family? Well, you'll see stronger and more unified marriages. If we have Catholic marriages all over the globe that are properly ordered, where God is first, spouse is second, children are third, and everybody else comes a distant fourth or fifth, and so on after that, there will be strong marriages. Another benefit is children in those marriages will feel secure and have a strong faith foundation. There should also be reduced conflict with extended family. If your extended family knows that that's what your priorities are, that's how you both, husband and wife, together have decided you're going to do things, that should result in reduced conflict. Now, if it doesn't, that might tell you a little something about that relationship not being as healthy as it should be. So keep that in mind. Having a properly ordered family also gives a clearer sense of purpose and direction in our family lives, and it provides for deeper spiritual growth for all of us in that family, for all the family members. Having a properly ordered family means that we're all going to be closer to God because everything is in its proper order. So let me wrap it up and remind us that the proper order, again, I have purposely reiterated this many times through this episode. So to kind of drill it into all of our heads that God is number one, spouse is number two, children are number three, and all others come after. I want to encourage you to take some time to reflect on your family's priorities. Where does your family get it right? Where is your family a little bit off the mark? And start to find just a small change that you can make in your family to align with this proper order for Catholic families. I hope that this has been informative. I'm sorry we went a little bit long, but this is such an important topic when we're thinking about how to bring more unity, how to bring more harmony into our marriages. And it won't come unless our family life and personal life are properly ordered. So I pray that this is an opportunity for you to reflect on the order that you have currently in your family and in your marriage and in your personal life, and find ways to bring your relationships into a proper order so that you can glorify God with your spouse together. God bless you. Go in peace. Thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode. If you've ever wondered just how toxic your relationship with your in-laws really is, I've got the perfect tool for you. Introducing the new free Toxic In-Laws Assessment, a self-graded quiz designed to help you identify the true level of toxicity in your relationship with your in-laws. Whether you're unsure if your in-laws are really that bad or you think they might be worse than you realize, this assessment will give you the clarity you need. Don't leave it to guesswork. Take the free Toxic In-Laws Assessment now and start your journey towards healthier and more peaceful family dynamics. Visit desiringpeace.com/quiz to get started. Disclaimer. All content and information on this podcast and our website, including our programs, products, and/or services, is for information and educational purposes only and does not constitute professional medical, psychiatric, or mental health advice of any kind, and does not establish any kind of professional client relationship by your listening to this podcast or use of my website. A professional client relationship with you is only formed after we have expressly entered into a written agreement with you that you have signed, including our fee structure and other terms to work with you in a specific matter. Although we strive to provide accurate general information, the information presented here is not a substitute for any kind of professional advice, and you should not rely solely on this information. Always consult a professional in the area for your particular needs and circumstances prior to making any professional, medical, or mental health related decisions.